Here we go. All right, today and part of next week's Bible study, we are going to talk about how we choose songs for gathered worship. So I'm going to just jump right in with Ephesians 5 and Colossians 3 and just hit on a few quick things. And then Eric's going to take over the rest of the time this morning, and then he will continue next week. So I just want to look at these two New Testament passages that speak directly about the songs of the church. So let's just put them up here on the screen. We'll work off of them this way. Ephesians 5 says, "Do not get drunk with wine, for that is debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit, addressing one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody to the Lord with your heart, giving thanks always." And then Colossians 3:16 says, "Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts to God." So when we look at those verses, at first glance, we might think that they give us a simple answer about what kind of songs we should choose for gathered worship. We should choose psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. And that just answers a question for us. The challenge is that Bible scholars aren't sure exactly what these three words are referring to. So the word psalms, first of all, certainly can refer to the Old Testament psalms. But Paul also seems to use that word in 1 Corinthians 14 for other songs brought by people in the church. And the Greek word itself was used for a song with a particular kind of musical accompaniment. In other words, it was a song accompanied by a stringed instrument. It wasn't a word specifically for the Old Testament Psalms. So it can certainly refer to them, but it's not quite that specific. The word hymns is actually not related to the way we use our modern word hymn. I think Eric might comment on that later. But the Greek word here just referred to a religious song, like a song of praise to God, is what that word meant. And then the third word is songs, which was just a general term for all types of songs. And specifically here, they're called spiritual songs. So these are songs that come from the spirit-filled heart of the born-again Christian. Which I think probably connects with the idea of the new song in the Old Testament that arises out of our hearts because of what God does in our hearts and in our lives in redemption. So I'm not trying to be confusing or vague in what I'm saying here. It's just that Bible scholars are agreed that we can't pin these three terms down to describe specifically three different types of songs in church. It would be nice if we could. But the words just don't work that way. And it's really common in Paul for him to just kind of put together a bunch of very similar words to describe one main concept. So actually, that it's not those three terms that give us the most direction about how to choose songs for worship in these verses. It's the rest of the verses that actually helps us the most. So first of all, it says, be filled with the Spirit. And then Colossians refers to spiritual songs, like we just said. So that tells us our worship can only please God because He's working in our hearts by His Spirit. The world can sing, right? They've got their own concerts and music and things. But only Christians can worship God because His Spirit makes it possible. So all of our singing should come from hearts filled up with the Spirit of God and in step with the Spirit of God as He transforms our hearts. And then Ephesians 5 continues, addressing one another. So the songs we choose are not just private worship songs, but they're songs for God's people to sing together and songs we can use to address one another. The way Colossians says it is, we are teaching and admonishing one another. So that idea of addressing one another, teaching and admonishing one another influences the songs that we choose. And then Ephesians continues singing and making melody to the Lord. And Colossians says it's to God. So even though we are addressing one another, we're also addressing the Lord. So many of our songs will be addressed directly to Him. And then finally, Ephesians says, giving thanks always. And Colossians says, with thankfulness in your hearts to God. So we're going to choose songs that are permeated with this theme of thankfulness. And then in Colossians, we also read, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly. And the wording there, spoken as he is to the church, with the plural here, he's primarily saying, let the word of Christ fill up the home of the church. Let it fill every part of this household of faith. The word of Christ ought to saturate the life of the church, making it its home in every part of the church family. So that just tells us that our songs we choose have to be full of the word of Christ, full of Scripture, full of Christ. And then it says, do this in all wisdom. And by the way, grammatically there in Colossians 3, probably the teaching and admonishing happens by singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. So in that context, he says, you got to do that with all wisdom. Choosing congregational music is not something to take lightly or to do half-heartedly. It requires wisdom to discern what would be best for the church family in general, like in general, what songs are we going to sing? But then what would be best each specific time we gather? So that makes me very grateful for all the carefulness and the thoughtfulness and the intentionality that Eric puts into our song selections. So these verses show us that we'll use a variety of types of songs, including Old Testament psalms, that both Scripture and Christ should permeate every part of our singing, that thankfulness should be a constant theme, that songs should help us sing to the Lord while also addressing, teaching, and admonishing one another, that all of our song selections should be made with great wisdom, and that all this must be truly led by the Spirit, because we worship as the Spirit-filled people of God. All right, that's the Bible foundation from Ephesians 5 and Colossians 3. Eric, you are on. I'll leave that there just in case you need it.
All right, and the remote. Okay, so let's dig a little deeper into just some of those principles there today, and we'll flesh them out a little bit about how we practically carry these things out in our gathered worship at GBC. We'll start today, and Lord willing, we'll finish up next week. Okay, so first of all, if we are commanded to sing to the Lord and to sing to one another, that clearly means everyone actively participates. We all are engaged in this activity. Everyone sings to the Lord, and everyone sings to the rest of the gathered church, which is really just an application of the broader New Testament principle of every member ministry, right? Like in Ephesians 4, the body causing the growth of the body. So we apply that principle to our singing and gathered worship. We all sing to the Lord while also addressing one another. I found this diagram from an author helpful. The text is too small to read, so I just put it over there on the other side. God ministers to us, that's first. We respond to God in our worship as we minister to one another. So there's this vertical two-way thing happening and this horizontal two-way thing happening from us to the church and the church to us. This is from David Peterson. He says, points out that mutual edification is the opposite of individualism. Having this horizontal view prevents this very isolationist, individualistic view. It's possible for us in worship to lose sight of that horizontal dimension and focus on just having my own private worship experience. Yes, I'm standing next to you, but it's just me and God. We don't want to lose sight of the horizontal like that. Or it's also possible to lose sight of the vertical and focus purely on the horizontal and view our Sunday gathering purely as a fellowship activity or just enjoying the pleasure of singing together and forgetting that vertical component. Peterson says that the balance of Paul's teaching, and look at everything Paul says, suggests that we view mutual ministry as the context in which to engage with God. Being together, ministering to one another is the context which we also vertically worship God. Edification and worship are different sides of the same coin. I love the way the author Matt Merker describes it. He says, as new converts and mature saints harmonize together, The church becomes a seminary in which all of us are simultaneously professors and students. We sing to one another for each other's mutual edification and admonishment. We are all teaching one another as we together worship the Lord vertically. So if we're commanded to all sing together this way, to the Lord and to one another, well, that means that we need songs that we can all sing. That's the first step. Now, that idea has multiple implications that we'll get into, but the first is we need to know the same songs. We need to actually know them. Now, that's tricky, right? Because we all come from different backgrounds. We've all been part of this church family for different lengths of time. But just practically, the way we need to do that is to curate an established collection of songs for our church family. There are thousands of hymns and Christian songs from across the centuries and that are constantly being produced today that we could sing. There are songs that you know from your background. There are songs that you listen to throughout the week. We cannot sing thousands of songs. So we need a collection that we can focus on as a church family that we will repeat and we will learn so that we can know the songs and sing together. And then over time, we add to that collection. We want to do that very intentionally and very thoughtfully and do it in a way that helps us learn them as we go. So the topic today is choosing songs for gathered worship, but we're not talking yet about designing a specific service. We don't mean choosing songs for a Sunday morning. That's going to be next week. Before we can even think about planning a particular service, I need to know the collection of songs that we have to draw from that I will use to build a service. What songs does our church family know, or what songs does most of our church family know? You can think of planning an individual Sunday service like planning a meal, right? We're going to have a collection of dishes that we will all sit down and partake of together. Well, if that's true, then choosing our collection of songs is something like stocking up at the grocery store or planting a garden. We're gathering the ingredients from which we're going to prepare future meals. Okay, so that's what we're talking about, getting that collection of songs together. Now, for many generations of Christians, and in still quite a few churches today, that collection of songs for a given church is decided all at once. How does that work? Hymnals, right? Lots of churches today have moved away from hymnals, including us. But for lots of Christian history, and still in some denominations and places, your church has a hymnal. It's got 400, 500 songs in it, and it's in the pew, and that's the song you choose from. If you're the worship leader, you go to your hymnal and choose songs for that service, because that's the collection that you have. There are advantages and weaknesses to using printed hymnals, and getting into that is not the point today. But since we don't have that established bound collection of songs that are in our seats, that gives us freedom to choose from among those thousands of songs available to us, and it also gives us the responsibility to curate our own collection of songs and to add to it wisely. So we're building our own hymnal, as it were, and we're just storing it digitally instead of on paper. I could talk more about hymnals. If you have questions about that, I'd love to talk about that, but we won't get into that today. Okay, so if that's true, if we're building our hymnal, then who decides what songs to add? Who decides what songs we are going to use? This is an important question. Theologian Gordon Fee famously has said, "Show me a church's songs, and I'll show you their theology." Show me the body of texts that a church sings over time, and that is what they believe. Because the songs our church sings both reflect how we think about God, and they shape how we think about God. The songs that you sing over time will shape your theology. Therefore, that means that pastoral oversight is essential in deciding what songs are added to the list. This cannot be relegated to, I'm going to use the term, just a musician, the worship leader, the pianist, the band leader, the secretary. It's done different ways. I saw a video this week from a church musician in England, and he was talking about his use of ChatGPT. in designing services. It was horrifying. He was so excited about it. I went to ChatGPT and I said, give me some hymns for a service about, and I forget what he said, Thanksgiving or something. And it gave him 5 hymns, and he said, I send them to the secretary. That sounds good. Oh. Don't do that. I don't do that. Because our songs are our theology, we need direct pastoral involvement. So in our church leadership, each of our deacons work closely with one of the pastors. As the deacon for worship, I work directly under Pastor Tim. I report to him, and he and I have really enjoyable and sober conversations about songs we're considering. And we'll talk about the merits of the text and the music and what we're considering to adding into our regular rotation. And I'll tell you that as a worship leader, I highly value that approach, that philosophy of pastoral oversight. Pastor Tim's thoughtfulness and care about that important aspect of our church life is one of the key things that made me want to be part of this church. There are many things, but that was one of them that made us quit our jobs and move across the whole country to come be a part of this church. If you don't know our story, I'll tell you that later. But that's really important, that the pastors are the ones who are setting the table, who are doing the grocery shopping, who are planting the garden for the songs that we will sing together. So in that collection of songs, right now we have about 145 songs or hymns that's in our collection that are used regularly on Sunday mornings. That number is excluding special occasion songs like Christmas, and that's a whole different thing. But about 145 that I would consider to be on our list. And we try to strategically plan to keep songs in a regular rotation to help us learn them. And we have a body of about 45 core songs that we repeat more often. So I went and did some research this week, and I looked back. I have multiple databases that help us track this. So in the past 2 years, okay, if we think in a 2-year cycle, there were 42 songs that were used between 4 and 10 times. Okay, so a song, it's going to come up twice a year or 5 times a year. Now, some of those are repeated when we're learning a new song. Like right now we're learning Christ Our Wisdom. Recently we learned Ancient of Days. That's going to come up multiple times a month while we're learning it, and then we space it out more. So those 10 times are songs that we were learning in the last 2 years. And then there are about 50 songs that were used 2 or 3 times. So they come up once or twice a year in a cycle of about 52 Sundays. And then there's a smaller group that only show up once in 2 years. They don't get used as often. So the different ways that we rotate them, and that's descriptive of the last 2 years. It's not prescriptive of what we want to be doing necessarily. It's just what actually happened. And so I take a look at those and I try to look back. We haven't sung that song in a while. Let's work that into a service in the future when we can. So we're trying to rotate them so that we can learn them, okay? But we can't really learn all these songs in the context of a Sunday morning service. If you come from a church background that doesn't sing many hymns or our types of songs, then a lot of our list may be new to you. You might be in a service, you're like, I've never heard this. Maybe you come from a church background that does sing hymns. There'll be some more of our songs that will be familiar to you. But even then, there are still some we do that are less common, and there are some that are completely unique to GBC. They're just our church family's songs that have been made for us, and you can't get them anywhere but here. And so you have different experiences. If you don't come from any church background, you're a new believer, then everything's new. You're like, okay, I gotta learn 145 songs. We don't want that to be overwhelming, and we want to help you do it. Wherever you fall on that spectrum of familiarity with our songs, we want to help you and your family learn these songs so that you can come and sing them and fully participate and sing to the Lord and to each other, to the rest of your church family. So we do that in a couple of ways. Number one, by trying to keep songs in a regular rotation, especially those core songs. We want to make sure we all know. If you come to GBC for a year, you will hear these songs multiple times in a service, and you'll start to pick up, oh, okay, that's a key song. But like I said, you can't really learn songs exclusively just in hearing it through one time in a Sunday morning service. And so all of our songs, or almost all of them, I got to check, are up on our website. We have the church music library, which is a tremendous resource that was created and is maintained by my wife, Heidi Jean. Thank you. So there's navigation from our homepage. If you go to, what is that? Resources and Worship with Grace, and then Church Music Library, it takes you to a page like this with an alphabetical listing of all the songs that we do regularly at GBC. And you can't see it on that slide, but some of them have asterisks, and those are songs that are under copyright, and so we're not allowed to make them available to the public. But they are available to our church family under our CCLI licensing that Pastor Tim mentioned a few weeks ago. And so if you're a regular attender and you have a login and password to the website, you can access all the songs. Anyone without a login and password can only see public domain songs on that list. So if there's an asterisk, it's going to block you. And if you need a login, is that still? Oh, that's my wife. So you can email us, email the church email, or talk to Heidi Jean, and we'll get you that login. And then you can access a page like this for every song. It gives you the full text. There's a link to a YouTube video or a recording, and if you're so inclined, there's sheet music. So if you read music, if you play guitar, you can get chords. You can go and access those resources to help you learn these songs. So there's different ways that you could use this. One idea is you could just take your worship guide home with you, and you go, okay, that was, I didn't know that song. That seemed new, but I really like those words. And you're going to take this and maybe stick it in your Bible and get it back out for your Bible reading tomorrow morning and read through that text and use it devotionally, or read it to your family at family devotions, or just take one of those stanzas and just pray through it. Let it, you could take "Come My Soul with Every Care" and use it for a guided prayer for yourself tomorrow morning. Just integrate these texts into your regular walk with the Lord and start to get familiar with them. And then if you say, okay, I didn't know that tune, I didn't sing it very well, jump over to the church music library and click on the recording and go, oh, okay, and just listen to it while you do the dishes or whatever. Heidi Jean has also curated a YouTube playlist that is linked on that. So if you want to hear them all in alphabetical order, you can do that. Or you can jump to that playlist and go find the one you want. There's different ways to navigate that. But you can get these songs into your ears throughout the week, play them for your children so that they start to learn them. And then the next time it comes up in a Sunday service, like, we know that one. And you can jump in and sing enthusiastically and joyfully. So it's a family project that together we want to sing together these songs that we all know as our church family. And so there is some effort involved in this, because this is an important thing that we do. Sunday morning is not a passive entertainment situation. We come together to bring our offering to the Lord, to bring the fruit of our lips that gives praise to his name. We come to serve the Lord and to serve one another. We call it a worship service, right? We come to serve. And you can prepare to serve throughout the week by learning songs. There have been times in the past when I've done a better job of we would post the coming service on the website and let you know what songs were coming. And we've gotten away from that, and I want to get back to that, especially with a lot of new folks that have joined us recently. I want to help you. You can go, okay, here are the songs this coming Sunday. Let's go listen to those. And so that's just a logistical administrative thing for me to get my life figured out about. But I'm not making promises, but hopefully we'll start doing that soon to help you learn these songs. That came back to my mind this week preparing this. I was like, oh yeah, we should probably do that again. So let's talk about then building our collection of songs. Where does that list come from, and what guides us as we expand it? As I said, there are thousands of songs we could use, and there are many, many very, very good songs. We live in a wonderful period of history, a time of a resurgence of hymn writing. It really had gone away for a while. I think back through the history lessons Pastor Tim taught. We have a resurgence of hymn writers, and there's an abundance, really, of high-quality, congregationally oriented songs and hymns that are being written all the time, coming from all around the world. And then you add to that centuries of great songs and hymns, and there's more than we could ever possibly learn and use here regularly. But we do want to keep adding great songs as we can, which means we need to evaluate the songs we might add. We'll talk more next week in detail about the nuts and bolts of that evaluation process, but just to establish the principle that there are two components to every song. You've got the words and you've got the music. We tend to think of songs as like a whole thing, but really songs are first of all poetry, and then they're also melody and harmony, and we're going to look at those two elements separately. They need to be evaluated independently, and we're always going to start with the text. If the text doesn't pass the filters, I don't care how great the music is, we're not going to do it, right? The text is the most important thing. Not that the music is unimportant, and we'll talk about that more next week, but we start with the text. It could be tempting to choose a song with a really enjoyable rhythmic pattern or a really compelling melody, and the words are, they're okay. It's not heresy. They're just kind of whatever. We're not going to do that. Or we could have a really strong text. It's full of scripture, it's theologically rich, it's poetically strong, but the music is really weak, or it's really hard, it's just unsingable. We're not going to do that. We're going to evaluate both the words and the music to find the best songs for us to add. Now, a little aside here. You might be thinking of a song that we sing here, and you're going, really? That made the cut. Maybe you don't find it especially singable, or maybe you don't really like the text. Maybe you have questions about the text. So there is certainly an aspect of subjectivity and personal preference in all of these things, and we all come with our own set of preferences. And so I'm not saying that we have discerned the list of 145 songs from on high that are the best. In fact, as I looked back at the last 2 years, there are 11 songs that we haven't sung in 2 years because they kind of just fell by the wayside. Like, I've tried something new, I'm excited about it, here's a new song, and it's like, that didn't really sing that well. Let's try it again. Okay. So we try things and then they fall by the wayside. So it's a process, right? And we are very, very fallible. So there's subjectivity and there's trial and error. And that's why Pastor Tim said it requires wisdom to choose songs, right? Because we don't want to be led by our personal preferences. I like this song, therefore you all have to like it. And so it requires wisdom, and we appreciate your prayer and patience and input. If you come and you go, I'm thinking about these words, is this true? Is this biblical? Or I've tried to learn this song, and it's too high, I can't sing it. Whatever it is, I do appreciate that kind of feedback when it's offered in a spirit of helpfulness. We all have personal tastes, and it's important to realize that. That one song that you really don't care for, maybe it's really old, or maybe it's really new, or whatever, it might be someone else's favorite song that really ministers to their soul on a Sunday morning. So you should sing it heartily for their benefit, for their joy, as an expression of love for them. Exhort them with that song that they love. It's just another opportunity to remind ourselves that our gathered worship is not fundamentally about me. It's not meant to be my private worship experience. We all have curated playlists of songs in our life, right? It's in my pocket. I can listen to 300 songs that I love. And that's cool. And that's not what gathered worship is about. Right? So we want to serve one another as an act of service to God and to the church body in a worship service. Okay, so then let's talk about starting the process. Let's say we've got a song, we're considering what are the filters we're going to apply to evaluate it. Now we'll start today with just two main categories of filters, and then we'll break that down more next week. So the first filter, we're looking at a song, we're going to ask, what's the quality of the content? The question is this good? Now, I've used the word good. You could use the word great or excellent. That word makes me a little nervous There's a healthy way to think about, let's choose only things that are excellent, and there's a way that can become a little bit elitist and idolatrous. And so I want us to sing good songs, good texts, good music. And if you want to insert the word excellent there, that's fine. But we're asking about the quality. That's the idea. What's the content? And then, in addition to the content, there's a further filter we have to ask, and that's about the appropriateness for our context. Yeah, that's a good song, but is it good for our church family? Is it the best song for us, this group of people in Southern California in the year 2024, right? That's a different question than is this just objectively a good text or a good tune? Is it a good fit for us? And there's many aspects or multiple aspects of both of those, but that's our two basic filters. And we're going to apply both of those filters separately to the words and then to the music. So we're going to look at the text and say, is this a good text? And we're going to ask, is this a good text for us, for our church family? Does it meet a need in our collection of songs? And then we're going to look at the music and say, is this good music? And is this a good music for our church right now? And if both the words and the music pass all the subheadings under those two filters, then we'll consider adding it to our regular rotation and doing the work to learn it and teach it and spend time with it and soak in it. If the way we thought about individual services was, let's just put together a cool service with whatever song I heard on the radio this week that I liked, and maybe you heard on the radio and you liked, and then we may never sing that song again, well then, it's not as important. Like, okay, one service, one song, whatever. But if what we're talking about is in a sense, publishing our hymnal, right? Building our collection of songs, stocking our pantry for future meals, we're going to slow down and consider what songs are we going to add. What songs are we going to ask you to invest time and energy in thinking about and learning and working on and meditating on? Is this text worthy of that effort? And is the music worthy of that effort? So like I said, next week we'll dig into the details and flesh out subcategories under those filters. It's not just those two main headings, but those are the broad categories. Let me conclude for today by making an observation about those two filters. Notice that neither of them are about the age of the text or the age of the music. We're not asking, is this song old enough to be good? We're not asking, is this song new enough to be good? There's a very real sense in which we don't care. We're going to look at all the body of hymnody available to us from the beginning until the present, and ask these two questions. Is it good, and is it good for us? We don't want to practice what has been called chronological snobbery. It's a C.S. Lewis term. He's talking about reading authors. And if you only read living authors, you're saying something about your view of the past. And he called that chronological snobbery. We don't want to practice that in either direction, in old or new. We could avoid old hymns because they're old, right? Old is bad, avoid old. Or we could avoid new songs because they're new. New is bad. We avoid old because it's old. We avoid new because it's new. We don't want to do that. Or we could use exclusively old under the assumption that old means it's good. If it's 1800 or before, it's got to be one of the great hymns of the faith. Or it's got to be new, because new is inherently good, right? You see how we could do that chronological snobbery of choosing something only because of its age. We're going to apply those two filters to every hymn or song we consider, whether it was written hundreds of years ago or last month. It doesn't matter. It has to pass the test. In fact, we intentionally want to make sure that we use songs that are both old and new and everything in between. There's reasons we want to use songs from a variety of time periods, because singing older songs teaches us some things and does some good things for us, and singing newer songs teaches us some things and does some good things for us. Singing older hymns, first of all, reminds us that God's truth is timeless. When you sing a text from several hundred years ago, the testimony of a Christian, their expression of praise from their walk with the Lord, and we sing that and we go, wow, That's exactly my experience this week. God has not changed. We did it this morning. What did we sing? We sang Calm My Soul with Every Care by John Newton, an English pastor from the 1700s. Did that resonate with you? With my burden I begin, Lord, remove this load of sin. With your blood for sinners spilt, set my conscience free from guilt. God has not changed. And so singing those songs reminds us that God's truth is timeless. Singing older songs also honors our spiritual heritage. It connects us to the universal church across time. We're singing the same words that Christians for centuries have sung because we're worshiping the same God who has not changed. We're affirming the same truths. And by using those specific songs, we're connected to them and we're honoring our spiritual heritage. We're not saying that we just invented this Christianity thing. We're recognizing that we stand on the shoulders of the saints who have gone before us, and our hymns is one of the ways that we do that, honor our heritage. Singing older songs encourages us with the faith of individual believers that are in the great cloud of witnesses from the past. You sing a song like, day by day and with each passing moment, strength I find to meet my trials here. That's the testimony of faith from a Swedish woman from the, I'm going to say 1800s off the top of my head. And that encourages me to hear her testimony of faith and then to take it into my mouth and say it out loud together with my church family here in 2024. So we're reading the testimonies of faith of the saints that have gone before us. Singing older hymns demonstrates humility. In other words, we don't think that we're the generation that has finally figured out this Christianity thing. And so all our songs are from the last 3 years because, man, we've got it. And we're not the ones that have figured out the best expressions of praise. Like our songs, this is the ticket now. We've finally figured it out, so we're going to use only new things. Using old things demonstrates some chronological humility. There's other things we could say here, but just one more, and that is that singing older hymns isn't on that slide, exposes us to ways of expressing truth that are outside of our immediate culture, outside of our time and place, in other words. So if we sing songs from other countries and other centuries, then we're hearing how Christians from those other cultures interact with truth and respond to God. And so we're exposing ourselves to other Christian expressions of truth. All right. But what about newer songs then? It's good to sing older songs. Is it good to sing newer songs? Yeah. Singing newer hymns gives each generation our own fresh expression of praise. This is the new song principle from Psalm 40 that Pastor Tim mentioned. As we experience God, we respond with our own praise, with a new response of worship and praise to him for who he is, for what he has done for us. And that happens afresh for each generation. It's not enough to only take someone else's expression of praise and use that, but we have our own. And so each generation of Christians does that, and singing newer songs helps us do that. Singing new songs helps us gratefully accept God's gift to the church of modern hymn writers and musicians. What if we only sang songs that were 1800 or earlier? We would be saying, yeah, I don't care about what the Gettys are doing. I don't care about Chris Anderson or about Stephen Townend or about Matt Papa or, whatever. I mean, God's given them to the church, but we don't need them. We've got the old stuff. God's given us these incredibly gifted people who have given their lives to crafting wonderful texts and melodies for congregations to sing. That's a gift from God to the church. And so we want to gratefully and humbly accept that and say, yes, we will use that. Singing newer hymns also connects us to our heritage. Old hymns connect us to our heritage, but new hymns connect us to our heritage because we're joining in this stream of Christians who have each added their own new songs and hymns. Every generation has added new hymns. Why would we stop doing that? Every old hymn was brand new for someone, right? Some of you were alive when How Great Thou Art was new, and now the kids think it's like thousands of years old. None of you were alive when come Christians join to sing was new, but someone was. Someone down the street wrote that text and gave it to their church, and they learned it and sang it. And then generations of Christians said, you know what, we should probably keep that one, and they preserved it. But they also kept writing new things, and that continues. Nothing has changed. We stand in that stream of the church responding with fresh expressions of praise and adding to the universal church's enormous hymn book. We can call it that. So new songs connect us to our heritage as well. And finally, singing newer songs gives us worship language in our own vernacular, in our own heart language. Okay, what do I mean? It is good for us to sing older songs for all the reasons we said and say things like, when peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, or though Satan should buffet, though trial should come, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say. Those are good truths that minister to our hearts. But we don't talk that way the rest of the week, do we? Have you ever said the word attendeth in your daily conversation? Do you talk about being buffeted? Okay? It's not wrong to sing that, and there's lots of good reasons to sing that. But we also want to be able to say, when I fear my faith will fail, Christ will hold me fast. When the tempter would prevail, he will hold me fast. I could never keep my hold through life's fearful path, for my love is often cold. He must hold me fast. We're going to sing in our heart language while still maintaining connected to Christians of the past and honoring our heritage and all of those reasons. So new songs give us our own vernacular. All right, so next week, Lord willing, we will take those two filters, is it good and is it good for us, the content and the context, and we will talk about how the nuts and bolts of applying those filters to texts. What do I mean, is the text good? What are the categories that make a text good or not in our understanding? And then applying those filters to music. What do we mean the melody is good? And then once we have that, then we'll talk about building an individual service, and that'll be a brief conclusion, I think, and then some other topics as well. All right. I left 1 minute for questions, so I hope you don't have any. But do you have any questions that I can either say that's next week, or I can look at Pastor Tim and he can answer? Yes? That's right.
Can you talk about that, please?
I can talk about it at length next week. It's a very good question. Yeah. Context is gathered worship, right? So by saying this list of songs, we're saying this list of songs for these people to come in this room on Sunday morning and sing together. That's a much smaller list than what are all the Christian songs right now that are good, right? For listening to, which is a totally different activity. We'll talk about that. Excellent question. Any other questions? Daniel. It's on the top of the homepage of the Church Music Library.
If you're on mobile, it's on the bottom.
If you're on mobile, it's on the bottom. Absolutely. Good. Good. Rick?
How do those filters apply to instrumentation formats and idioms?
That's also coming. Yes, absolutely. So there's the what will we sing, and there's the how will we do it, and who will do that. Yeah, exactly. The style of the music instrumentation, yeah, that's coming. Absolutely.
Is it, when you say that, like, is the music, like, singable, do you take into account what musicians we have? Can they actually play?
Absolutely. Yes. And that connects to that question, because a lot of our style is driven by the instrumentalists that we have in our church family. We could go out and hire professionals, and some churches do that. We're not going to do that. We're going to do the music we can do with the people that God has gifted us with. Yep. More on that next week as well. November 10 is going to be instrumentalists, and yeah, that's right. Stay tuned. All right. Thank you all for your good attention. Go get your kids